thank you to the three panelists for very rich and engaging talks. I'm going to keep my remarks very brief, and in the few minutes I have, I'd like to do a couple of things. One, I'd like to briefly locate these talks in recent scholarship in museum studies, and then I'd like to draw out some of the questions that emerge from them. If a common thread unites the scholarship on museums that has emerged since the early 1990s, it is the insight that museums are profoundly social institutions, that they are embedded in the dynamics of race, gender, and class that animate the societies that produce them. Museums define national histories and identities, and by implication, limn the boundaries of national belonging. As arbiters of knowledge, museums carry the authority to categorize and assign meanings to bodies and to the material objects in their collections. In the process, they define human cultures in ways that have historically rationalized hierarchical relationships among them. Such exercise of power extends beyond the discursive elements of displays to what we might call the performative dimensions of the museum experience. Who is allowed access to the museum? How visitors come to understand their relationship to the displays? What behavioral norms the museum encourages? Who is rendered as the subject of knowledge, and who is positioned as its object? Who looks, and who is there to be seen? In all of these ways, museums participate in relations of social power. It is thus that one scholar has labeled the museum as a transformational space that is instrumental in creating national, race, class, and gender identities. Power, too, comes to bear on the histories of collections, the histories of where they came from and how they came to be held by museums. This is a particularly painful legacy throughout Native America, where collectors robbed communities of cultural materials and even the bodies of ancestors, so that museums have played a crucial role in colonial dispossession and the annihilation of traditions. Conflicts still wage over who should possess Native cultural materials and even bodies. Our own campus, which holds one of the largest collection of Native human remains, is only one of many sites of such struggles. In all of these ways, the museum has historically been bound up in the dynamics of slavery and colonialism, in contests over citizenship and belonging, in the processes that define society's center and its margins, all with material effects for people of color. But while museums have served the interest of power, they also carry other social possibilities. The talks today emerge from recent changes that raise the question of the extent to which museums can function not only to reinforce, but also to subvert social hierarchies. Can the museum perhaps become a transformational space that broadens previously restrictive notions of Americanness, creates respect for social difference, and shores up the identities and cultures of tribes and other communities that often disidentify with the nation state? Is it possible, in Eduardo Diaz's terms, to shift the center in museums so that they represent the experiences of marginalized people and thus reshape the national narrative? What possibilities does technology carry, as in Conrad Eng's analysis, to change the content of museum displays and to broaden access to them? And what are the political consequences of such changes? Finally, as Sven Hawkinson asks, can Native collections in mainstream museums, the legacies of a devastating colonial history, support the endeavors of Native communities to recover and perpetuate traditional knowledge and practices? Each panelist has insisted that museums offer these possibilities, even as these institutions inevitably continue to bear the weight of their fraught histories, the legacies of social exclusion, the ghosts of racialized bodies placed on display, and collections created out of colonial plunder. Our three panelists speak from institutional positions that reflect the widening but inherently contradictory social possibilities of museums. As the premier U.S. National Museum, the Smithsonian has historically played a key role in defining an exclusionary, racially inflected notion of national identity, while its collections find their origins in 19th century military and naval expeditions, early U.S. imperial endeavors. Similarly, the founding collections of the Burke Museum came from three turn-of-the-century World's Fairs, events that placed colonized peoples and their cultures on display to imbue racism with scientific authority. That museum's position in a major university speaks to its authority as a bearer of knowledge, an authority that has historically served imperial interests. These histories and the social contradictions that emerge from them are at the center of the questions that I wish to ask the panelists to commence our discussion. So after that long preamble, here's the first set of questions. What are the political limits and possibilities of the institutions in which you work or have worked? How do their positions as national, university, or tribal museums aid or hinder the project of marginalized communities? And what conditions would enable further change? And I'll tell me what the panelists address this.